What was an uncanny, creepy or terrifying moment in your life that felt like a scene right out of a thriller or a horror movie? I woke up from a coma in a hospital. I was completely paralyzed and my vocal cords were fucked so I couldn't talk at all. I was in so much pain. I was put on ketamine but nobody told me this, so I couldn't understand why I was hallucinating. I saw some really scary stuff. I believed I was strapped to the bed and in some kind of illegal experimentation center. The nurses were covered in blood and the doctors wore masks and kept screaming at the top of their lungs. I cried so much and the nurses were trying to figure out why. I was desperately trying to ask them not to hurt me but I had no voice. This went on for a week until I was taken off the ketamine. It's been 12 years and I still have nightmares. I will never touch a hallucinogenic drug again as I've been told you can get flashbacks to the other times you were on the drug. I will never go back there. Every time I get ill I'm scared I will have another coma and refuse to call an ambulance even in the most dire situations. I genuinely thought I was in a horror film. It was fucking terrifying. My wife and I had checked into a hotel room and had gone to bed. My wife is asleep. I'm just starting to drift off to sleep when I hear a soft voice in the dark room, just above a whisper say, "I think they're asleep now." Thinking I just heard the voice of someone hiding in our room, I jump out of bed in terror, turn on all the lights, search the bathroom, shower, under the bed, the closet. But there was nothing. My wife and I were the only two people in the room. Now some people might have believed the room was haunted, but what I experienced was a hypnagogic hallucination, but for a few minutes there I was quite terrified. One time I was brushing my teeth. I walked out of the room and my instincts went, "Bro, you need to go back in that room." So I took 3 backward steps into the room to find someone staring in my window. It was after a tornado, and they were definitely up to no good. I get goosebumps thinking about it. I yelled "fuck no" and they ran to their car and peeled out. I was driving from the local airport one evening with my future wife. About 9 p.m. the road took us by a pull-off where some county dumpsters were on one side of the road. As we drove by, a blacked out car that had been parked spun out on the gravel and got right behind me doing the speed limit. I mean, he was so close in the rear view I could only see the tint on his windshield, not even his car's hood. It wasn't a police car. It was an early 2000s Chevy. He was following us. I took some random turns using my blinker thinking at first he was just going the same way as me and wanted me to hurry up on the one-lane road with a double yellow. But after about 3 random turns that kept up in the same row I realized it wasn't random. Told my wife to hold on to something and aggressively turned down a side road with my blinker indicating another way. Sped 90 down a road with a much lower speed than that, took a few extra turns, and ended up parking in the airport parking lot. Turned off my lights and we waited. Same car came barreling down the road I was just on hauling ass. Watched him go around a bend out of sight and took off hauling ass in the opposite direction with my lights off, using the moonlight to see. Once I got close to a main road I flicked the lights on and drove under the speed limit the rest of the way home. Freaked us both out so much. Almost called the cops and parked at the police station so the cops could pull him over instantly. No idea what they were doing but didn't play games with that shit. When I was an 11 to 12-year-old girl, I was competing in a pony club show, and I'd forgotten a piece of riding equipment in my instructor's truck. She held my pony and I ran back to her truck, down a small dirt road to the parking. The parking lot was almost vacant because all people and ponies were near the riding ring. Except one random guy, who was just hanging out there, by his car. He asked me if I had my driver's license, to which I responded I didn't because I was a kid. He then told me his car was stuck in the mud, and asked if I'd get in it to drive while he pushed. I declined, and started walking back towards the riding ring. He drove away in his car no issues. Wow. Probably dodged a big bullet there. Your story reminds me of something my mom told me about her youth. When she was in her late teens and early 20s, she did a lot of hitchhiking. I think this was super popular among young people in the 1960s and 1970s. At the time, it wasn't yet considered dangerous. One time she met an older man at a gas station and asked him if he could take her along to the next bigger town. She didn't really want to ask him because he gave off some strange vibes, but it was late evening and the gas station was out in the sticks. She couldn't just stay there, so she told herself, "I'm sure it's going to be fine." When she wanted to get in the passenger seat, the man told her she had to sit in the back. She asked him why, but he wouldn't give her a clear answer. Just kept insisting that she had to sit in the back. They began to drive and it was mostly uneventful. My mom tried to do some small talk with the man, but he'd only give her very short answers. She thought maybe he's tired, so she stopped trying to engage. Finally they reached the town where my mom wanted to go to. She told the guy to pull over at a specific location. When they reached the location, he simply drove past it. Didn't even slow down. My mom got really confused and asked him to pull over after the next crossroad, but once again he simply continued driving. She asked him, "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't respond. Instead, he pushed down the central lock which locked all 4 doors. Luckily my mom is a very confident person, and if she wants to, she can be very scary lol. She told me, "For a few seconds I panicked, but then I said to the guy in a calm and very stern voice, 'Stop the car right now and let me out.' The guy didn't react, so she said one more time, 'Right now.' Apparently he got scared because he pulled over and unlocked her door. He didn't say a single word. She got out, and once she was out she ran away. When I was living in my parents' house, my bedroom had this closet that sat directly opposite my bed. For whatever reason I can't remember, the door couldn't close. That closet had always given me bad vibes, and I almost never slept, but the worst was one night when I was home alone. I was laying in bed trying to sleep, when suddenly it got eerily quiet. I was home alone, but I could typically hear nighttime sounds coming from outside. As I lay there trying to rationalize, I started to hear some whispering. At first I couldn't make it out, but then I recognized it as my name. Obviously freaked out, I was nearly paralyzed with fear. I sat there for what felt like forever, when I felt what felt like a thin finger, slowly tracing down my foot from toes to heel. The rest of that night is honestly a blur, but I remember having this super strong urge to look into the closet. I'm happy I never did. So I was dating a girl in my early 20s. We went on a road trip to California when she started displaying symptoms of schizophrenia. She would be normal all day and then all of a sudden just shift in vibe. So one night I'm with her and we're staying alone in this little building on a farm, while doing a work trade. She was having normal conversation with me when all of a sudden she freezes and stares past me with a terrified look on her face. "It's right behind you." I look behind me, find nothing, and ask her what she saw. She doesn't explain. Then starts saying bad things about herself and spiraling more and more negative with her thoughts. Then her pupils widen in an instant like she just got eye drops put in. Then I notice she goes to grab a knife off the side table. I quickly grab her wrist of the hand with the knife and wrestle her down to the ground. I eventually got the knife from her without her being able to do anything with it. The craziest part was how strong this person was. I had probably 60 pounds on this 110-pound chick, and she was putting up a hell of a fight trying to keep the knife. Man, that was a road trip from hell. Sorry, this is long. Been wanting to properly tell this story for years. Driving from Pennsylvania to Arizona a few years back, no hotel stops along the way, just me and 2 friends taking turns at the wheel for a 35-hour drive. We finally cross the state line and enter Arizona after nearly 2 days of straight driving with minimal stops for food/fuel/ etc. It's about 1 a.m. and we're running low on gas. The only gas station for miles that is listed as being open online is located about 3 miles inside of Petrified Forest National Park. We don't have any other options, we decide to check it out. My friend is driving, other friend is riding passenger, I'm in the back seat, they're both women, I'm the one male in the car. Soon as we drive into the park, we're wondering how the hell there's an open gas station in here. It's pitch black, no cars in sight, the park is clearly unoccupied. The only source of light on our 3-ish mile drive to our destination was our headlights. Miraculously, we pull up to a gas station buried inside this park. There's no attendant, the store is locked, but the pump is lit. My friend pulls over, and my friends joke that I should be the one to pump the gas since I'm the only man in the car. It's really because none of us want to step outside. We're all feeling creeped out about the atmosphere we've driven into. I get out, the pump accepts my card, and start filling up the tank. As soon as I start fueling up, we see lights approaching from the distance. Let me restate that there had been no lights whatsoever beside our headlights and the faint glow of the gas pump at the station. We could see the blackness of night stretching for miles in this park. There had been nobody on the narrow road with us the whole time we were driving in. Where were these lights coming from, if we hadn't seen them until the second I exited the car? I say to my friends through the window, "Must be a park ranger." I realize as I'm saying this that I'm verbalizing it to calm myself down rather than because I think it's true. Lights get closer, they're blinding, high beams are on, shining directly at me as they pull into the station. Eventually they get close enough that I can make out the vehicle. It's a random RV, not a park ranger. I see a man in the front seat, skinny, glasses, mustache, baseball cap, white guy, that's how I remember him, and there's nobody else in the vehicle with him. I assume that he's got to be in the same boat as us, tank running low, no place to stop for gas, no choice but to fill up at the park, but he drives around the unoccupied pump and faces his RV in our direction, for no apparent reason. At this point I can see his eyes, we're close enough that I'm looking at the driver clearly as I'm filling up the tank. He smiles at me as he continues to inch his vehicle closer to ours, moving at a speed so slow that it was like he was trying to provoke us. He's getting closer, closer. Why isn't he stopping? He's about to hit us while we're immobilized, and he's driving less than 5 miles per hour. So my friend in the passenger seat builds up the courage to reach over and honk the horn to tell him to stop. The sound of that horn, cutting the tension of the absolute silence of the night, will stick with me forever. At this point I was looking not only at the RV, but also through the window at my friends. Without words, we're all communicating our extreme horror and confusion at the situation unfolding in front of us. The RV stops, just yards away from our car, and the man waves at me again, almost apologetically, with a smile. We're not fully fueled, but I know that I'm not comfortable standing at that pump any longer, so I hang it up and hop back in the car. I don't even have to say let's get out of here. As soon as I close the door, my friend is already starting to move the car. RV guy has at this point positioned himself in such a way that it is impossible for us to drive straight out of the station because he's blocking our path forward. Our only choice is to reverse into the forest, i.e., the unpaved, non-drivable forest, and angle ourselves out from there. We eventually do it while the RV guy sits there, staring at us, still not moving to exit his vehicle or fuel it. We get out, start driving as fast as we can on that narrow path out of the park, and keep checking behind us to see if we're being followed. We weren't. It looked like the RV turned its headlights off as soon as we left. We didn't discuss what had happened until we knew we were 100% safe and back on the highway. When we finally were able to approach the situation, we realized that the RV must have been camped out in the blackness of the forest with its lights out, waiting for someone to approach the pump. We would have seen the headlights otherwise. It would have been too black not to have noticed them. We have no idea what would have happened if we hadn't honked that horn, if we had let him slowly inch his way closer and hit our car. Would he have said, "Sorry, let's all get out of the car and check the damage," and then tried something on us? Would he have lured us out in the open so we didn't have the protection of the car? Was he alone in the RV? We will never know, and I'm damn sure glad that we didn't stick around to find out. I was part of a small drum corps in Texas back in '06. We were on tour and got around in 3 15-passenger vans. This was before Google Maps. Our driver had a set of directions from MapQuest. One night, we were on a small 2-lane highway in central Texas. It's 2 a.m. Next thing we know, we're no longer on a highway. We're on a dirt road, and the driver isn't sure how he got there in the first place. We end up pulling into a trailer town. It is very dark. The town, if you could call it that, was a couple square blocks of trailers and campers, and one brick 2-story building that looks like a convenience store. There's only one light on, and it's the mosquito control light inside the brick building. We start noticing eyes looking at us in every direction, glowing red and orange. Hundreds of pairs of eyes. We are genuinely freaked out. Driver pops on the high beams, and we realize the entire town is covered in live deer. I mean hundreds of deer. They're on top of cars, on top of campers, in yards, on the side streets, and lining the side of the dirt road we were on. And not a single one moved. Not an ear wiggle, not a ground scratch, nothing. They just stared at us. The only time they moved was to turn their heads to keep looking at our vans as we slowly, very slowly, drove past. There were no people. No other lights aside from that mosquito trap in our headlights. Despite deer being on top of trailers and in truck beds and on top of sedans, not a single person was awake in this trailer park. I still think about that night. I thought I dreamed it, but friends from back then remember this night. We used to joke that the deer were actually the residents of the town, and at night they transformed into ungulates. Lol. It was just uncanny. Unreal. Never seen anything close to that again. We drove through just fine and ended up back in civilization, but we could never explain what we saw or why there were so many freaking live deer in this trailer park. One time I got stuck in the elevator on the 46th floor. I pulled the doors open and wanted to climb up and out, to the 47th floor. I remember movies and or CCTV footage of people climbing out, and then right as they do, the elevator moves and cuts them in half. So I back up, and right as I did, the elevator started working again. Terrifying AF, knowing if you would have made one more move, you'd be one of those videos. Almost feels like life is testing you. Okay, here's one. I've been a cop for 12 years. This happened maybe year 2 or 3. We get a call for a lost child that can't be found at a local Halloween festival at a church. Myself and my partner decide to check the surrounding neighborhood, as there are already enough officers checking the festival grounds. This is the beginning of graveyard shift, so 9:30 to 10 p.m. more or less. As we are checking this neighborhood, a small dilapidated house that has a blanket for a front door catches my attention. I notice an eerie orange glow emanating from the inside of this house. When I say house, This place looked like a small shack than an actual house. Myself and my partner decide to check the inside to make sure she didn't wander in here. We announce our presence and get no answer. Being that there was no front door and the objective being the safety of this girl, we entered the shack. Right when we entered, it was apparent the house had no electricity. That eerie glow was each room and hallway was lit with dozens of glass, religious, candles. As we walked from room to room looking for anyone in said child, we kept hearing a constant crunching under our feet. The whole time we were there felt like we had stepped into another world. This evil, surreal feeling was palpable and stomach-turning. We both felt like we didn't belong here. It was eerie. After not finding anyone or anything but empty rooms with candles, I pointed my flashlight at the ground. We soon found out that the crunching we were hearing was thousands of cockroaches all over the floor squirming around. The floor appeared to be moving and alive with insects. Myself and my partner both looked at each other and decided to get out of there. We continued searching the rest of the neighborhood until officers at the festival radioed that the girl was found. Later that night, after ending my shift and replaying the day/night in my head, the whole event kept bothering me. Something didn't seem right about that place and that shack. The roaches on the ground were a horror movie level of an amount. It just felt surreal and wrong. The following day I went back to the neighborhood during the day, but could not locate the shack anywhere. It was as if it didn't exist. I asked my partner as well if he felt similar to me. He told me he also went to check and couldn't find the place. He said the whole thing kept him up and he couldn't sleep. To this day, that was probably the closest thing I've experienced to the paranormal or high strangeness in my career. Still bothers me to this day. I had a stalker when I was a teenager, not as creepy as some of the stories I've read here already, lol. One of the creepier incidents happened when I was up late on my computer. I didn't have the blinds all the way shut, but there were bushes in front of them. The doorbell rang. My parents didn't wake up. In order to wake them up, I had to walk past the front door and the windows and up the stairs, which I remember being creepy. Anyways, they just told me to go to bed, so I did, and the next morning my dad found a pile of cigarette butts in the bushes outside the window where I had been sitting. There were also incidents of like tapping on the windows and seeing someone running through the woods in the backyard, but everything stopped when I moved to college. This reminds me of a story about a predator lurking in our neighborhood for a period of time. I was in primary school, I think year 5 or year 6. My room was at the front of the house, as were my parents. For a week I heard this tapping on my window quite late at night. First night I wake my parents, they said go back to sleep. Second night, I ignore it. Third night, I tell my dad and he lunges out of bed with a bat and out the front door. Next day dad tells the neighbors. We had about 10 plus families on our street, and they all said their kids were experiencing the same thing. Then it was on the news that some young girl had opened her curtains and a guy was asking her to sneak outside with him. Still gives me the creeps to think this happened. A few months ago I was home alone in my house, sitting in my recliner dicking around on my phone. The only light was coming from the lamp above my chair, and everything else was pitch black. Out of nowhere, I heard a very clear human whistle coming from down the hall where I couldn't see. There was no way this was wind or machinery or whatever. It was 2 distinct notes, one high and one lower, and there was no sliding between them. It was very specifically one note, and then the other. My house is haunted AF, so I just kind of let it go because, well, what else am I supposed to do? But it was super creepy and would make for a great scene early in a horror movie. I never used to believe in cryptids. I heard stories about them and thought they were cool, but always told myself there's no way. A few months ago my boyfriend and I take my dog outside to use the bathroom. It's probably around 2 to 3 in the morning and we're both having trouble sleeping, so we decide to smoke on my back porch. After being outside for probably about 5 to 10 minutes, out of nowhere, it gets super cold. All of the crickets stop chirping and the early morning birds follow suit. The only noise is the wind blowing in the trees. Suddenly, there comes what can only be described as a barking noise about 60 feet from my house. It's quiet at first, but it doesn't take long before we can both hear it without straining our ears. It gets louder, but I can't see the source of the noise due to obstacles obscuring my sight in that direction. It just keeps repeating the same sound over and over, like a recording, about every 15 seconds. It sounds the same every time, and that's what makes my hair stand on end. My neighbors have dogs, but they're all Chihuahuas and Yorkies. Even if they were big dogs, I don't think this is a big dog. I don't know what it is, but it sounds fake. I don't know, it's hard to explain, you just had to be there. My boyfriend and I get too creeped out and put out what we're smoking, call in my dog, and go to bed. The same thing happened the next night. We couldn't sleep again, so we took my dog out at around the same time as last night. The noise starts up almost immediately. It's faster this time and somewhat louder, but it stays the same the entire time we're out. Maybe we were feeling brave or maybe we were stupid, not mutually exclusive, but we stayed out for longer. Nothing happened, which is something I'm grateful for. After a little while though, the noise stopped. My boyfriend and I wondered what the noise could have been, but there were no theories other than something scary. We went 2 nights without the noise to our relief, but on the third, it came back. For whatever reason, with a vengeance. My boyfriend was just standing on my porch whistling a tune when the noise came back. It was louder than ever. Beforehand there were 10 to 15 seconds intervals between the barks, but now there were none. It was just barking constantly. It was still the same old recording but louder and more aggressive. We went inside immediately. Skipping forward, it's been about a month since I last heard the noise. Before then it decreased in frequency, going from happening every night to roughly 4 nights a week to 2 nights a week and then gone. My boyfriend and I were so invested in this that we acted like a couple of little idiots and investigated where the noise was coming from, but only in the daytime of course. There was nothing there. No nest or anything, just dirt like everything else. I never found out what it was, and though I am very curious, I admit that a large part of me also doesn't really want to know out of fear. If you guys like this video, please drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my Instagram account Scary Time that is linked in the description, and as always stay scary.